We started this with hatred towards the French people and with random knowledge about Albanians, which ended with us going nowhere. But do not worry, because the Dix,
You
have
know
enough
about
information
Albania?
Albanians. I think I know a few, like one thing about Albania at least. After today, you will know at least one thing about Albania,
Okay, teach
France,
me,
and maybe a few
senpai.
other places. And I mean, look, like if we get into that kind of a vibe, Albania does have a phallic looking, like, shape in some ways. So
Really?
I mean, I guess I don't know. If you want to think about the PP, think about the PP. It does have like a vagina looking shape as well. So if you
Oh,
want to think about it like that,
that's
just
interesting. A peepee and a vagina at
you
once.
could combine them. I mean, what's a PP if not just a reversed vagina? Think about it. Think about it for a
True.
second. But yeah, the point of this is I got bored, and there's a thing outside that made everyone even more bored, and people can't go out and do shit. So we're gonna spark your imagination a little bit. I'm doing the mage thing where my fingers are, jazz fingers. I'm
Jazz
putting a
fingers.
spell on you right now, not jizz fingers. That's for
He's
later.
he's putting a spell on everyone by talking about vaginas and peepees at the
And
start of this
Albanians, yes,
podcast.
exactly.
Hi.
And yeah, so we're gonna talk about vampires. Technically, it was supposed to be horror stuff, but I can't keep a straight face after everything I've discovered about vampires and stuff like that. So, congrats.
Yes.
Exactly. So let's start with this. Let's start with this most, I think, silliest fact that I did not expect, but the year was 1749, so this was the 18th century, and we all know, maybe I think most of us, Europeans at least, that there's a job that a person has to do called the Pope. So the Pope Benedict the 14th, dude, famous dude, did a lot of things, right? The man did a lot of things, but one thing I don't think has been mentioned ever that I know of, or you don't hear a lot about it. But after a little bit of research, apparently it's true. The man kind of got tired of peasants, plebeians, whatever you want to call them, desecrating graves. The peasants
Ugh.
would just go in, cemeteries, open them up, and be like, "Yo, is that a vampire? Let's find out today on this talk show."
What? They just would
And they
open the
found out,
tombs?
yeah. And he was like, "Yo, this is fake news, guys. Come on, you guys are just getting too drunk on that church wine. Put it down. Calm your tits. Calm your, I don't know, sheep
Come
stuff.
your
Whatever the plebs
chips.
have. What do you think a plebeian would have? Like, what's a pet of a
Oh, a
peasant in the
rat.
Middle Ages? Rats. See, I did not expect that answer, but I guess, I mean, today rats, sure, but back in the day, I don't know, maybe. Definitely rats, because honestly, the way it always, like,
I
people
mean,
always talk about
they
the
didn't
plague.
want it as a pet, but they had it.
You just had it. You didn't have a choice. The
You
pet
didn't
was
have the
like, you
choice.
were
It
the
was just
pets.
there.
Yeah, you were actually the pet of the rat. The
Yeah,
rat was like, I let you live human.
exactly.
And yeah, he basically officially did like a church law decreeing that desecrating graves is illegal based on trying to find vampires and bodies of vampires. And in Europe back then, there was a little bit of a craze. People were going a little bit nuts, so he had to do this. And there were actually a few people that supported him, like big important people, like one of which was the one single empress of Austria, Maria Theresa. Some of you guys know,
Wow.
not the goody goody two shoes one, the one from India, that actually technically is super bad. I mean, but the one from Austria that is part of the dynasty called the Habsburg dynasty. Might have heard about that? Maybe no.
Vaguely.
Habsburg chin, the one chin that makes you think that they actually were vampires and or
Yeah.
involved with gremlins, trolls, goblins, and so on.
Big oof.
Big oof. That's the type of chin you get when you have too many babies from
From within the family?
yeah, basically when you're like, I feel like the Habsburg family was basically how teens felt. Like this, the way they did stuff was how teens felt it was proper. Like, you watch fucking Twilight and you're like, oh yes, this is romantic for teenagers.
This
And
is
then the teenagers back
top
then was
tier
like, oh yes,
romance.
making love with your brother or sister is the right thing. Oh yes.
Stepbro, what are you doing?
Oh my god, she cracked it. It's the Habsburg resurgence.
Yeah.
We're talking about them because they actually, the Habsburgs actually ended up supporting the Pope in forbidding peasants from desecrating graves. Why did the peasants desecrate graves, you might ask? Here's your answer.
Vampires.
So, 17th, 18th century in Europe, people were kind of going nuts. Imagine COVID-19, the shit you're going through right now. Imagine the shit you're going through right now, but people are not really fighting for toilet paper, but people are fighting for the ability to be allowed to go to the cemetery to take someone out of the ground and put a couple of stakes in their heart because reasons, right? So 17th, 18th century, people are going a little bit nuts. So there were cases, I guess, chronicles of famous like writers and shit like that they wrote down a couple of these. Honestly, most of them were boring as hell, so I just invented them. Okay, so just listen to this little story about little Pieter from Albania. So Pieter from Albania giggles his last giggle as he utters, I'm in danger. As he sits in the back seat of a horse carriage, he gets yeeted by an unknown person. His body is later found close to the local cemetery. There are no bite marks because bite marks are kind of weird, a little bit gay. And vampires are, at least those vampires that are not super modern, they don't sparkle. They're just pissy dead bodies that are just bloated and have shrunken skin. Yes, this is the general how vampires used to be. They weren't really into blood.
What were they into then?
Let me tell you, they were very into having lots of disgusting liquids over their bodies and just looking absolutely, bloated and disgusting and small and bad and just being a dick. That's what vampires were back then. All they wanted to do is to screw with you. Honestly, that's like.
So they didn't even want your blood. They just wanted to screw with you.
Yes, they did not care about blood. We'll get to the blood part at some point as well.
Okay.
So let's pretend that Peter's old neighbor, Mr. Rilland, that's an actual Albanian name. Yes, I researched Albanian names because I wanted to find names, which also means reincarnation. So imagine Mr. Rilland reincarnates into a version of himself that just came, just an uglier version of himself that came back to haunt villagers. Why? Because they were just, they just kept the bards singing when the man just wanted to go to bed. Like, it's fucking late. Tomorrow morning, you gotta feed the
Poor
chickens.
man.
You gotta the farms. Yeah. And the man's like just sitting there, yo, go to bed. Everyone's no, fuck you. And now he's come back. He has a grudge. He has a blood grudge,
He wants
to
revenge.
make sure, yeah, the neighbors are screwed and stuff. So, the kid's dead. There's a zombie or a vampire or a monster going around. What do you do? What do you think you do? What would you do?
Hide and be a pussy.
Hide and be a pussy. See, that's like a lot of people sort of did that. And there's cases upon cases. Surprisingly, I actually found written cases of scientists writing down, doctors and scientists writing down all this stuff, like how people would do all these processes and like how they'd get rid of the monsters and how they would,
so it was documented pretty well.
Yeah, it's surprisingly documented pretty well, and it's mostly not vampires that want blood. It's vampires that look like shit. It's just basically goblins and stuff.
Did they just call all the ugly people vampires?
No. Like, even dude, are you kidding me? Look up just I don't know, medieval vampires. I think those vampires, even those medieval ugly-looking vampires, even those bastards are good. Problem is, you'll just get sexy stuff because that's obviously what people want. But the ones that are interpreted by people, those are just like, I'll give you again. I will also get to the point where why vampires look the way they look and why there's a couple of different types, right? Okay. So the reason, the way to actually get rid of a vampire, at least in some parts of the world, in the Balkans, for example, in Serbia, as far as I know, the villagers would gather and find another virgin boy, like, our aforementioned Peter that we talked about, a very pure virgin boy. They would put him on a horse, a black horse, a big black horse, and they would make the horse walk all over graves. So it would be a white kid riding a big black stallion next to a church.
Oh, okay, right? Okay.
Balkans are lovely, aren't they? Yes. So exactly, they would basically put Alin on a big black horse, and the horse would ride all over it must have worked, right? But that's the thing. You know how they got to find the vampire? When the horse would basically, I forgot the word for it, but like do some weird movement with his legs.
Okay, and that's how they would
Um,
know there's a vampire there?
yes, that's how they know there was a vampire there. Like you can already see a little bit of, like
Okay.
maybe this might have not worked exactly how they thought, but
Maybe, but well,
yeah.
it was long ago. They didn't know in that time, you know.
I knew it was Grandma. Exactly. No. So imagine you open that grave up
Yeah,
and it's nothing unnatural. Everything is fine. It's just a dead body in there.
yeah.
They open a second grave up and someone starts thinking, what if they're both vampires? And they're like, how do you know that? It's like, look at their teeth. And they look at the teeth. And guess what? The teeth are a little bit more protruding. The teeth look like they're bigger,
I've read that as
sharper.
well. And
Yeah.
nails would look longer as well.
Nails would look longer.
Yeah.
This is the part that where we mentioned why they would look like the way they are interpreted, because almost like the skin dries.
Almost.
Exactly now.
Wow.
So basically the skin does tend, it tends to dry. That's why in many cases today you have embalming and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you would end up looking like, just imagine those like shrunken heads from like witch doctors in movies. Well, maybe not exactly like that, but sort of in that direction.
Yes.
And nails grow not because they actually grow, but because the skin shrinks, so it looks like it's bigger. And the teeth, it happens, the same thing happens. It's just the gums disappear, basically the liquids go out, and
the teeth look
gums
longer.
disappear, so your teeth seem bigger.
Yes.
And that's how people in some areas would find vampires. And what would they do? They again, this is actually not bullshit. This is the part where it's archaeological dig sites, people that actually spend half of their life, maybe more, trying to find vampires and such, and myths, and work with different types of like scientific, whatever, everything, scientific everything. And they found in Bulgaria, they found dig sites with buried people where they had their chests penetrated with a stake. So it's probably a vampire, and their heads put in between their legs. So that was a statement more than anything.
Oh, okay. I was gonna
the
say
heads
why
the heads between the legs?
Because
so that he has a harder time finding his head if he wants to come out of the grave. That is the reason.
Okay.
That is the actual reason they, I guess, found out.
Okay, interesting. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I was surprised too. Very much surprised.
I did read that when there was the plague and stuff like that, and they had mass graves, if they later look back on the bodies, they would see that the gums were like gone and the teeth looked longer, and that's why they would have rumors of vampirism. But I've never heard of like putting the head between the legs.
Honestly, it's not like the plagues would probably spread some things like that, just fear mongering. But even without the plagues, you would still get enough cases where it's like, oh, so something bad happened in the village, a person disappeared, a person died. Surprisingly, the first thing they do is go to the cemetery and check the latest buried person. Most cases would usually be like, oh no, it's fine. But sometimes it would be different. So yeah, the bloody pointy tooth boomers would not be able to anymore, like, to suck blood and do anything of that sort if they didn't have their head on their shoulders. So that's why they did that. What do you think about this part? Do you want to maybe mention the Malawi thing now, or should we do it a little bit later, because I still have a little bit?
Do it later
Let's do it later. Okay, let's do it after we get to the
when you get to more recent times.
Let's annoy people and get them super depressed about disease, and then you can like give them the Malawi thing. So there's regional myths as well, like specific areas. I mentioned to Kato earlier, there is many ways to get rid of vampires, one of which is boiling them in wine.
Wine?
How many of you would want to get boiled in wine? Think about that. Would you want to get boiled in wine if you had, like, imagine, again, Middle Ages, maybe a little bit later, Renaissance, Enlightenment, and someone's like, yo, she's a vampire. Like, do we, burn her at the stake, put a stake in her heart, feed her a steak? I don't know, maybe there's just steaks involved here. No, never mind.
I wonder what's the most painful way to die? Burned alive, boiled in wine, a stake to the heart.
Everything that takes long. Apparently,
I think I would prefer a stake to the heart.
Stake to the heart probably kill you in seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to boiling, yeah. Another thing to kill vampires was smashing their heads in with a rock. Yeah. I guess no head, no no enjoyment. I mean, what?
Yeah,
Sticking wooden rods in their hearts. This usual one that you see in movies and stuff like that.
that's the cliche.
That's a cliche one, exactly. So the hardcore people, the hardcore bastards in Serbia, again, going back to Serbia, since apparently they either documented it all or just kept telling the stories enough where people remembered them.
Yeah.
So they would eat dirt from the grave of a vampire and would rub their bodies and nether regions with the blood of the corpse that was supposed to be a vampire. So that would defend them from the crazy.
What?
Yeah, that was
They would
supposed to
rub it
defend
on
them.
their nether regions?
They'd rub it everywhere. They'd basically rub it literally.
That sounds like
Butts,
some sort
asses,
of
dicks.
weird kink.
Look. Maybe the vampires made them do it. Vampires,
Yeah.
mind control, stuff like that.
Mind control.
Obviously, that vampires like, oh yeah, to
And
rub dirt all over yourself.
how do you get to the logic of I must rub his blood on my nether regions?
How do you get to the logic that garlic is good against them? Like, there's so many little
True,
things.
where did that come from?
There's a reason for that. Where that came from, apparently. Actually, let me mention it now. It's from a disease. Garlic ends up irritating people that have that specific disease, which I will mention later.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it basically made people think that garlic spooks away vampires. So
Yes.
it's not real. It doesn't. It just spooks away a specific type of people that have a specific type
Poor
of disease.
people that have the disease and now they're the vampires.
How do you get the logic vaccines help against disease? Look, mister, look.
I mean-
here. Are you like an anti-vaxxer, Ben?
No.
No, good. It's going to be funny to see anti-vaxxers after they invent COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I survived, and then they die from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's think. What else? Italians in Sicily dealt with it in their favorite way, which was to favorite way to solve things in Sicily. What do you think? How do they solve things in Sicily?
Oof.
In the south, like mafia. Like,
yeah, kill them, shoot them.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, they didn't really have guns back then, but everyone says with guns. Well, they just basically drop you at the bottom of the sea. I think the Italians.
Oh, they tie something to your feet and then.
Yeah.
See you later.
See you later, Vampigator. So they tie them down, yeet them to the bottom of the Mediterranean. Like, good luck getting out of there. And then they would go get some cannoli from Grandma Julia, and they'd have a good time. Yes.
They would get grandma's pasta.
Yeah, some pasta, some pizza.
Yeah.
Have a good time. So far the vampires that we discussed and found don't as much really care for your blood, right?
Yeah.
They literally just want to either cause trouble, annoy you, or help you. Yes, there are vampires that want to help. So let's get into that, a little bit of that as well. So there's other cases, actual real life cases where people thought vampirism was a thing. One was in Venice.
Mm-hmm.
A group of vampire hunters were forced to stick a brick down a vampire's throat, supposed vampire. Because I guess, I don't know, maybe the vampire was apparently a lady vampire and she just, I guess, wouldn't stop telling them shit or something. So they're like, fuck you, plus, you're a vampire, so let's kill you. And the body of the vampire was found in a ancient tomb, like a big ass tomb that had hundreds of skeletons. And her body was put in a very specific way, again, typical stake through the heart. Apparently this spread very fast and far. The brick in the mouth was also there because apparently the teeth, the canines were apparently actually longer in her case, which is, I guess, it's sort of I don't know, maybe I wouldn't really say mutation, maybe 1 in a million type thing. Surprisingly, people do have this, where every now and then a human will develop something just a little bit different. Maybe you'll have the
really
end of the tailbone bigger than you should, or maybe you end up being born with 2 fingers instead of that 1 finger that you need to have a pinky or some shit like that.
Yeah.
So there are very rare cases where this happens. Diseases included as well. We'll mention that in a little bit. And okay, I need some breath. What do you think so far? What do you think so far about the vampires we discussed?
It's just interesting that not all the tales of vampires have it in them that they want blood. I thought vampires were always related to wanting blood.
That is a good point. I was confused because it's researching this, I didn't understand why there's so little mention of just bloody murder, just vampires just sucking the blood out of everyone, right?
Yeah, you would think if there were vampires going around town. there would be
barely any
blood,
mentions
or at
about
least like
sucking blood.
people missing blood.
Yep.
Like when they
There's no
sucked
mentions
dry.
about having the typical 2 dots on the neck
Bites,
and
yeah.
having the sucked out blood and stuff like that. People would just either die, no blood loss, just death. That's how it usually happened when victims would be involved.
Yeah.
But again, there are the reason we're discussing this second part now is to show different types of vampires and how they work. So the Italians so far are just like they like to talk smack and they end up getting killed in funny ways because Italia, ciao.
Yeah. Okay.
In Romania, surprisingly, some of you guys might know about a few, maybe at least one Romanian thing, but there's more than just that. What do the Romanians apparently know that vampires exist. Everyone thinks it's a myth, but the Romanians know for sure.
They know for
Why?
sure.
Because Romanians just like to see other Romanians in pain, so they just love the idea of a vampire that just makes them suffer. So they have two types of vampires, besides the famous one. They're called Moroi and Strigoi.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Both, how do I call it? One is a spirit that ends up coming after a person died in a very either peculiar situation, and they had grudges and stuff like this, right? So they had a grudge on Earth, so they come back. They had a grudge and they come back for that. Yeah, they don't even come back as a human. They just basically balls, dicks, and grandmas coming back to life to just talk. Usually females, actually. Every now and I think the Moroids were females and the Strigoi often were males.
Okay.
So that's again.
So what did the males do?
The males, I think, were actually they had bodies that were represented on the planet compared to the Moroids, which are spirits apparently. Okay. Or some stuff like that. It's basically just a lot of
women. They don't even get a body.
Yeah, poor women. They just get to annoy you.
Yeah, just spirit.
But then again, this is at least the Romanians at least give half of the vampires' bodies. Let's move on.
They want equality.
Exactly. Yeah, we want equality for vampires. Thank you.
Yes.
So the Italians call them strega actually, but those are witches. So even today there are stregas, which are considered wiccas. The witches.
Okay.
It's the most famous vampire though being Vlad the Impaler.
Obviously.
Tepes, I guess.
If you don't know him, you've been living under a rock.
Basically, he's very famous. You don't really. It's basically very spread out, and the reason why he's is
You cut out there. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry. There's actually the dude. Just so you understand who the dude is. Sorry, Vlad the Impaler. Funny name, Impaler, right? What would that mean? I don't know. Either he had a big PP.
Ooh, impale me.
A lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Or he just liked to kill people that were sick, poor, enemies of the state, disloyal noblemen, and such. And he basically spread just as much as coronavirus. It was horrible. He didn't really choose you're basically if you got in front of that man and he didn't like you, you'd end up on a spike probably.
Yeah, he just liked to impale people, whether he was a vampire or not. Yeah,
exactly. Vlad the porker. I mean, maybe he was a porker as well. I don't know. Vlad the Poker. Good reference to What We Do in the Shadows. Good movie about vampires. Highly recommended. Very comedic though. So he had kind of a tumultuous past. He was, as far as I know, captive in the Ottoman Empire for a period. Yeah. So those men probably gave him a little bit of butt loving in there. I don't know. Because after he got out, he didn't really like those people. Let's say he didn't really like the Turks.
Okay,
understandable. There were cases where he just sit outside a siege, a citadel, a castle, while sieging them out, and the man would just put all of his enemies on pikes and eat food in front of them, while the people in the castles would slowly descend into madness. So that's why he's sort of represented as this monster. That's why this is where you start to go into the more modern stuff. You go into territory that is literally the closest it gets to blood drinking vampires, right? There would be rivers of blood because of this man.
Okay, yeah, there's where the blood comes in, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's the start of it. So after that, guess who decides this man is worthy of a book? But besides, he changes his name and stuff like that. Bram Stoker.
Yes.
You heard about that dude?
Yes, I know that dude.
you know that dude a little bit at least. Like he
Yes.
wrote Dracula, he wrote the book, I think, right? I don't think
Yeah.
it's a movie. Like for a second there, I actually forgot if it's a book or a movie. It's probably a book. It was
Yeah, I
there
think
were
it's a
three
book.
main books, but people actually think Bram Stoker's is the first one. It's not. The first one is another British dude called John Polidori, something like that,
Never
called
heard of
Vampire
him.
with a Y, spelled with a
Okay.
Y. Um, and he
Isn't that
published it
the
in.
old way of writing the word or
I
something?
don't think so, but maybe I don't know. Also, what's that? But the reason why people assume vampires want blood is because there's one bad type that does attack cows, and they left 2 points in the neck of the cows. And when they saw the bad type, they saw they had 2 points. And then assumed vampires can change into bats, which then made people think that they wanted blood. And so, see, this does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But there's many different sources that give many different ways of why they drink blood, what kind of when would they do it, if it's the bat or if it's the actual person. There's very few mentions of it before the years like before the 1800s. Like after that, after they write their books, people start seeing stuff
Yeah.
differently. People are like, oh, so I got bit, or they got bit, or someone got bit.
Yeah, people read the books and then they see it happening in them.
Yeah.
Like they think something happened and they assume, oh, I've read about vampires. It must have been a vampire.
Aren't these the same people who put animals on tail? It could be that. It could be, it doesn't have to be a fake story per se, but then again, the Pope did literally tell them, like, I don't know how much I love this story. I don't know how much I need to stress that the Pope, at least one Pope, was like, yo, guys, it's fake news. Just please stop. Just don't spread the information. People spread the information, yes.
But like if a Pope would tell me, oh, don't go looking in graves, I would think like, is the Pope a vampire?
Is the Pope a vampire? See, the Pope literally stands in too much sunlight to not
Oh
to be a
yeah,
vampire.
true.
He's like so old and like still ends up dying and like like barely can move. Like a vampire would like maintain a little bit of youth. The Popes are like, oh, my back hurts and my teeth have fallen out 50 years ago.
Okay, true. He's too crippled to bite anyone.
Yeah, he's being brought pure, virgin boys to feast upon.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And besides Vlad the Impaler, who liked to poke and impale, and those people that wrote books about him, there is another character that I presume this is his female equivalent, or maybe just like if you don't want to say equivalent, maybe just her own thing. Elizabeth Bathory from Hungary.
Okay, what
is
did
a
she
lady
do?
that she basically, I personally feel like she makes her own type of vampire a thing. Like she invented her own type, because there's many types of vampires, even modern ones, the blood drinking ones. There's many type of the old ones, but
Yeah.
basically what she did was bathe in the blood of young girls.
Oh Jesus!
Virgin girls. Again, the virgin part is very important.
Virgin blood is better than non-virgin blood, guys. Better stay a virgin.
Yeah. So Elizabeth Bathory from Hungary, she was I think like her married life was not one of the best ones. My blood is
Finally, being a virgin is good, guys.
Yeah, like right, someone needs you. Vampires need you. So basically, what she did was she lived around the 1560s and ended up killing lots of young girls. And her maids were being mistreated. Obviously, she was one of those people who like probably rip your fingers off for like I don't know, not cooking her food properly. And she was put in a prison at the end of her life. She died at 54. Vlad died at 45. A little bit of a interesting number thing there. Coincidence, maybe.
True coincidence, but interesting.
I think not. But yeah, that's the more Balkan, Eastern European part of it. The Irish, though, have something that also inspired Star Wars vampire called the Avarta. Okay. It's a dwarf tyrant mage. Like, I don't get the tyrant part, but sure.
Sure. What does Ireland have with dwarves?
I don't know. They just like like if you're bad, you're just a.
You're always a dwarf if you're a bad person.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, something like that. Because apparently it was a dwarf mage. I don't know how mages worked back then in Ireland, but it was like ancient times. and it was a spirit of some kind, I guess, or maybe a monster. He lived and existed, and he was a mischievous little shit. Again,
No shit.
no blood sucking. He was just a mischievous little
If you
bastard.
were a little shit in the past times, you were a
You
vampire.
basically were a vampire. That's how they sort of explained vampires. They didn't really call them vampires. They just called them, like, the Romanians called them, what did they call them? That exactly what I said, Moroi and Strigoi, which
Yeah.
again were more of a annoying little shit type situation. And then the Greeks and the Bulgarians and the Serbians would use a term called virko or virkolak, something like that, which in Romanian actually means werewolf.
Oh, okay.
And there is also relations to that about vampires and werewolves.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about vampires and werewolves.
Yes, and especially in movies. Again, surprisingly, where they come from mythology, from history, from dumb people that thought they actually saw a werewolf when it was actually just hairy uncle, I don't know,
Yeah.
Joe or some,
Their hairy
Ivan.
grandma in the woods.
Yeah, hairy grandma in the woods. She was like, "Oh, my back," and people were like, "Yeah, they needed something to entertain themselves." There's always that one person who's like, "Guys, let me tell you, scared sir," and everyone's like, "No, please." He's like, "Ha ha ha." Yeah, what's your stance on virgin blood and maintaining youth, by the way?
Oh, I'm just looking for virgin boys right now, so I can stay young forever.
So send your CVs to Kato.
If anyone wants to apply to be my
you don't really
virgin
have
boy.
to get killed for this.
I mean, I can just like trip a bit out, and then
just
can come back
or something. Just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I don't think virgin blood is any different than regular blood. So nowadays we know more.
You know what the reasoning for this was in the movie What We Do in the Shadows, if I remember correctly, was, you know why vampires like virgin blood is because you'd rather have a sandwich that nobody touched than a sandwich that somebody put their dick into.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I guess, yeah. Let's see what else is there. So we had the little shit from Ireland, dwarf mage. He was a mischievous little fuck, and he had to be slain by a chieftain, and he had to be buried, defeated again 3 times after that because he didn't want to die, and he had to bury him with his head down, so so he wouldn't be able to, like. There's a lot of, like, head has to be down in between your legs.
Yeah, in weird positions,
stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Different, like, Kama Sutra for vampires, basically. Except you die most of the time at the end of it.
Let's make a book, Kama Sutra for vampires.
I bet it already exists. If not, somebody fanficked it.
Yeah.
And basically, I personally want to believe, deep down in my heart, I want to believe that when that chieftain, like, slayed the Avarta vampire dwarf mage, he just, like, left, put glasses on, even though they didn't have black glasses, and he was like, "Stay down, you little shit." And then just, like, in the background, there's just explosions and stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe, like, medieval explosions, magical explosions.
Magical.
Mm-hmm.
We believe in mages and wizards and werewolves.
Yeah, there has to be some kind of explosions.
We need magical explosions in the story.
A little bit, yeah. Just imagine that, just a dude going away from. There's also, speaking of dudes and graves, there's a grave apparently on top of that place where the mage tyrant dwarf is vampire is buried.
Really?
And
you can go visit it?
Where exactly. It's just Google the Avarta, Avartagh, and you will get a different name, but it's basically the same thing. It's Abarta, something like that. It's weird. It's Irish, okay? I don't know Irish. And there is a place that people in that city or town, village, whatever, they know the story, they know the legend, and they're like, "Oh yes, if you go there, you will see a tombstone that is, like, ancient." And apparently that's where it's, like, under it's something, even though apparently there was, like, they dug it out of it, into it, and there was nothing, but, whatever, maybe someone else stole it.
But they still claim it was the location where it happened. Yeah,
it's at least they sort of know the location, like, maybe, what was involved there. So yeah.
Okay, so we have Irish vampires. What's next?
Russian vampires, apparently surprisingly very popular, very, like, I would never have expected the Russians. I maybe expected them to be into werewolves, but apparently Russians just have everything. Slavs in general. The Russians specifically, and I want to add, I've looked into this a little bit. I want to add Vurdulak. Yeah, there's a lot of those. That term is basically also comes from Greek. That is a Greek term. I did not expect that, but
okay.
that is a Greek term. And that one is what, generally speaking, people would call werewolves here, but in other Slavic countries, those can also be used
For vampire?
for vampires. And there is a very specific reason why that is a thing, and I will mention it again in just a second. But the Russians thought that vampires were actually spirits that were the wives. Again, very,
The
very,
angry women.
not, yeah, angry women. Just, yeah, they're basically
Don't mess with us or we'll come back to haunt you.
Definitely, absolutely. Don't mess with, happy wife, happy life, something,
Yes,
statements,
exactly.
phrases. Um, the wives of spirits, they were the wives of spirits that lived in every home in Russia. So again, it's about vampires, but the story isn't even about them, which is kind of sad. But no equality, obviously. So yeah, the spirit itself was called the domovoi, which means home spirit, and they used to be mean ass spirits. Again, just vicious. And their wives of those, I guess, male counterparts,
You're kind of
those
cutting
were the
out. Connection
vampires.
is shitty.
What was that?
You're cutting out.
Oh, am I okay now?
No.
Okay, let's maybe change something here. 1 sec.
Okay.
What about now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, we changed the thing. Okay, so talking about angry woman, your sprite looks like an angry Russian.
Russian.
It's made by an angry Serb. Net is kaput, yes. Moldovan
Look,
internet. No,
look.
it's not.
Nix is the angry boy here. I'm the angel, you know.
Obviously. I always get angry. I'm so angry. Oh my god, I'm so angry.
I think in reality it's reversed.
I mean, I'm not sure. Maybe it's not. No, I doubt it. And yeah, the thing was, the Russians had this spirit that was a house spirit. Originally, it was a bad one, but eventually just got lazy and bored, and it was like, yo, I guess I'll just be nice to people now. And so everyone had that spirit in their house, and you had to sort of like respect it, but it would also help you out. Like, it would feed you sometimes. It would like help you repair things that were broken and you didn't even notice. Yeah, like a handy little,
handy little vampire.
No,
Spirit?
this was not a vampire.
Yeah.
He was the husband of the vampire. The vampire was usually the wife of this character.
Okay.
They'd be called the Kikimora, which would I hated it when in The Witcher they use the same name and they call it the Kikimora or something in English, and I'm like, that's not how you say it. But that's not the point. Yeah, right. And spirits are anime confirmed, basically. Yeah. So the Kikimora would basically, potentially, the name came from the same origin of the Moroi in Romanian, or vice versa. It's not 100% known, but basically those people all had the same like experiences. So angry spirits that just wanted to be dicks to you and ruined your lives, and you had to sometimes even move houses just because it was so bad that you'd get haunted at night. And that specific spirit, the vampire, Russian vampire lady thing, was usually the spirits. But this is why I liked this specific story, because it actually gives you a reason why they would exist. It was the souls of unbaptized children, or it was the souls of people who killed themselves.
Okay.
So suicides. Because I have like this to me like screams fake, because like this is the reason why, because the Orthodox Church in general, and even the Catholic one, whatever, condemns suicide, and
it would just be a reason for you not to do it, or else you'll come back as that.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, the word kikimora, it's or kikimora, how I think it's said in Russian, is used in The Witcher games, which are heavily inspired by this. In The Witcher, you might actually find creatures that are very much inspired by real life Slavic, old types of Slavic, like werewolves, Verdalok, I guess how Denny mentioned that one, and Kikimoras, which are very different than what they're supposed to be. In the Russian or Slavic mythology, it's like basically usually a person with just like a crow's face. Like crows, like ugly looking, like not even like beautiful bird, more like disgusting looking monster kind of crow, and human clothes and stuff like that. And yeah, So another Slavic story. This is
Yeah.
the werewolf part. Another Slavic story mentions that um, you would get infected by vampirism if you would yeet, if you not yeet, if
Yeet.
you
If you yelled, yeah, yeet.
dab. Oh my god, just kill me now. Just destroy me, kill me. Make me a vampire. You would eat the infected body of a sheep that
Okay.
was bitten by a werewolf. So werewolf kills and bites a
And
sheep,
sheep,
doesn't
and
finish it
you.
off. You would just have an infected sheep that would have like lycanthropy type shit on it.
Yeah.
So it's not only vampires at this point. Vampires and werewolves, surprisingly, almost in every culture are intertwined early on.
Yeah, they have to
Later
deal
on,
with
it's
each
two
other.
different things. Like now, today, look, I guess werewolves, lycanthropy, stuff like that, is its own disease, its own creature, its own mythology. Back in the day, it was very much intertwined. And the thing was, you would become a werewolf if you ate that meat.
Mm-hmm. But how do you
But
become a vampire?
after you die as a werewolf, you probably have a longer life as a werewolf. I think I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I read that about that, right? And then after you die, you become a vampire.
Oh, so you become two things by
Yes,
doing one thing?
like one thing is just a step to the other. That they
Okay,
are very
interesting. That's the
much,
first time I hear that.
yeah, exactly. And I didn't know that. I actually looked into that, and it was pretty interesting to read about how there are many cases. It's not one single thing. It's very many cases where if you know disrespect the spirit, and you end up becoming this creature, and then after that you end up to live in the second phase. The Russians, the Serbians. I think even the some of the stuff that Kakeri dropped me, like the Finnish stuff, there
Mm-hmm.
are relations to that. But I think for the Finns, it's a bear. It's not a werewolf. Like
Oh,
there's a spirit type thing that basically uh potentially like is the reason why vampires would like creatures, not even vampires but creatures that are basically the equivalent of what it is for the Russians, that monster, right? For the Finns
yeah.
it's something different, and I think the Russians actually took some of that stuff from the Finns. Like from the Finns itself, they have something surprisingly very similar to the Inuit people, which are in two different places on on the planet, and like one's in Canada, one's in
Yeah.
northern, like at some parts,
They're so
at
far
sometimes
apart.
it's, yeah, they're so far apart, and they have very similar ideas about taking care of nature. If you don't eat all of the animal you hunt down, it'll
Yeah.
come back and hunt you.
Yeah, you need to be
And
respectful of the animal that you kill, and you need to eat completely.
exactly, exactly. And I think a lot of that stuff actually might have come to other people. And Christians generally like to invent stuff like, you know how you have these like winged demons today, like, or just like demons,
Yeah.
Satan, stuff like that. Most of those things are basically taken from Celts, from Finns, from Magyars, from Mongols. Stuff was just taken that was weird and was changed. And it was changed again, and it was changed again until you
Yeah.
get to a point where you just get this like basically perfect like body of just muscles and like bat wings and mothmans. Exactly.
That's your modern vampire. A
Did I
sexy
say Finland
dude.
is Scandinavia? Like I'm surprised, but nobody in Scandinavia likes Finland to be called Scandinavian, and vice versa. Like Finns are like, we're just our own thing. Thank you, bye.
Thank you,
But yeah,
bye.
Slavs thought that werewolves were a part of it. It was part of the whole shebang. It wasn't a separate thing. So werewolves and vampires are basically the same thing. Who would have guessed?
Who would have
Again,
known?
almost nothing related to blood. It's maybe a little
Yeah.
bit of like an infection. Speaking of infection, oh
Corona.
shit, we will get to that as well. How long have we been going for?
43 minutes.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I have a little bit more. A
It's
little bit
fine.
more. Um, if you want me to shut up and just end it,
No,
just
continue your story.
okay.
And you were gonna talk about viruses?
Viruses in just like I guess I don't know 2 minutes. Let's end it with a few more cases. Um, so in France, there was a creature called the Melusine.
Uh-huh.
She's just being nice. She is being nice, baboon. She absolutely is.
No, you said
There was
it,
a creature
baboon.
called the Melusine, and that creature was supposedly a mermaid. So again, another vampire that is not a vampire, but it had a lot of the characteristics, and it had a lot of the things that vampires would also have. I
Okay.
forgot most of them, but basically the gist of it was she would hide in from most cases and from daylight and stuff like that, not because she was scared of it, but because it would be easier to see what she actually is. She was a mermaid type creature that lived on land and tried to find a very rich husband. Um, oh my god, beautiful Twitch chat right there.
Yes.
And she would try to find a husband, and she would help the husband in many ways, like help him financially, like I don't know, magic or some shit. Fucking maybe she
Magic.
was just smart, maybe she just knew math, and she was like, yo, this is gonna
Yeah.
like drop in price, so just sell it
Maybe,
now,
you
right?
know, women just had a brain.
Maybe just women. I would not be surprised if this were actually the thing. It was just there was just a smart woman, and guys were like, "She's a Melusine. She's a demon. Kill her now
She has
before
a
she takes
brain.
over your
She
life."
must be a warlock.
She must be Satan, right?
Yeah, she must be doing magic.
Yeah, magic.
Burn her.
Burn her at the stake. But the thing
Boil
was, she
her
would
in
help.
wine.
She would help you. And there was only one catch. You would basically end up dying. I don't remember how exactly, if you saw her in her true form. But you would be able to see her once a year. Basically, you'd go fuck once a year, right? And you'd only do it when she was ready for it. Like, she'd transform into a human, and then after that, she'd transform back. So if you see her in her normal form, either I think she dies or you die or someone dies. And the interesting story part about this, in the French, apparently French mythology, the dynasty Lusignan or something like that, famous French dynasty, was somehow very much related to the creation of this monster. Like, people basically were like, "Ha, those fucking Lusignans, they're so ugly and dumb. They probably make, I don't know, vampires." And it was also responsible for their success because they had a lot of money and power. Because again, the Melusine was supposed to help a lot. But yeah, you're very right about this. You only really needed a little bit of, a little bit of just weirdness to be like, yo, they're definitely demons. And
she must be that.
Yeah, she must be a demon because she's pretty, or she must be a demon because she's smart, or he must be like a werewolf because his, chest is so hairy.
But I also feel like pretty often, if you're successful and rich, people are also like, "Oh, he must be a vampire."
Yeah, obviously.
That's the problem in Malawi nowadays.
Do you mind mentioning it? Let's go.
Let me talk about Malawi in 2018.
Okay.
And also in 2002, it first started that there were rumors of vampires in Malawi.
Okay.
The thing is, Malawi is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's in Africa. I don't know exactly.
It's basically close to Zimbabwe and Zambia.
I don't know exactly where it's located. But apparently in 2002, they had vampire rumors. And then again, in more recent times of 2018, at least 6 people were confirmed killed because of vampire rumors. Basically, you have a lot of like poor people over there.
Yep.
And nowadays, we know the climate is changing. Things are getting worse and worse. They're getting more droughts and shit like that. And when there are droughts in Malawi, they blame magic. People are withholding the rain to fuck other people over.
Honestly, my country is not really that poor. I mean, it's kind of poor, but for European standards. But even then, I would assume even here people are like, oh, this is because, I don't know, demons. Let's go pray harder, because that's going to help and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised. So
yeah, not only the climate, but also if you in certain parts of the country walk around with like electronic stuff that's a bit fancier, or like you're running around with a water bottle and a wireless charger for your phone and stuff like that, they think you're a vampire because you have this magical electronic stuff that does things and you don't know what it is. So you must be a vampire if you have that stuff. If you're rich, you're a vampire. There are like 5 things behind vampire rumors in Malawi. Firstly, myths. A lot of people are not very well educated, and they blame a lot of things on stuff like magic and vampires.
Can I mention one thing about that? During the Ebola outbreak, which is very apropos for this situation, considering we might mention or have already mentioned coronavirus. When Ebola happened, people that were sick had to be treated would think about the people that came to help them, usually Americans, Europeans, not only, but still. Those were hazmat suits because you don't fuck with Ebola. That little bit of blood gets on you, gets in a scar, and you're fucked. So they'd come in the hazmat suits, and people would think they are, either vampires, demons, evil, magic, stuff like that. So it's I also read
something about that. they believe that people don't give anything for free. So they think the government in Malawi or wherever gives blood to the Western people, the white folks, and in exchange, the white people come there to help them with like just aid in general.
That's a lot of blood
like
for like not a lot of aid.
Yeah,
I'm assuming.
they think the people out like they won't give anything for free, so the government must be giving blood to them in exchange for help.
Look, at least the people just have fun with a good old story, fake story.
Yeah,
because that's a good one.
Yeah, and like, can you imagine like just one government to the other, like, hey, give me blood and I'll give you aid. Like, I'll help you out if you give me blood.
Exactly that, like exactly the specifics. Like, there's like, I don't know, Trump is a vampire or some shit, or Trump and Obama are vampires, and they're like, yeah, let's get some of that Malawi blood.
Let's get some of that blood, and we'll give them some help in return.
It's 2020's interview with the president or some shit, and it's like they're sexy vampires in their spare time. Secretly, he doesn't like golf. Trump doesn't like golf. He's just a vampire.
Yeah, he's just a vampire. But also just like politics in general, apparently, like because a lot of people are not very well educated, they use rumors of vampires to scare people into believing that a country is not very like safe and prosperous. Safe, yeah. They just use it to campaign or decampaign fellow politicians. To be like, hey, it's insecure here, you better vote for me. I can help against these vampires that you hear about.
So what you're saying is presidents have actually asked or given advice and help with
I won't say presidents, but politicians in general. Yeah, they have used it as a reason to vote for them or not to vote for another politician or something like that. And also just a lot of people in the country believe in like magic and Satanism, so that doesn't help when there's rumors like, oh, there's vampires over there. And in the meanwhile, they're just killing innocent people who are like epileptic or something like that, or they're running around with a wireless charger for their phone. So they must be a vampire.
I think parts of the south of Africa were at least at one point fetishists, which is basically kind of like, it's another way of saying they believed in spirits and stuff. Like like how the Japanese have like, I think, a belief that if there's a spirit for everything, right? Different types of ghosts and stuff. That's for the Shinto religion. I think the African old religions had that type of stuff before Christianity and Islam. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're like very much still very how do you call this? What's the word for this? I was when you believe in things, when you're gonna break the mirror, the black cat's gonna cross the road.
Stuff like that. Yeah, I think like a big part of it is just people abusing the situation of the country.
Yeah,
like using people, their fear against them. Partly there's thieves just wanting to kill people, and then they can blame it on vampirism.
Vampires, yeah.
Like, oh, I had to kill him because he was a vampire, but I totally didn't steal his wallet as well. No, totally not. He didn't have a wallet on him. And then just, like politicians and people that can earn from it,
Yeah, they're superstitious, very much superstitious. And as far as I understand, like Catholicism or Protestantism and Christian religions only really got to some parts of Africa like recently. So, they probably still, like, generally speaking, Africans kind of combine whatever they believe in with whatever other religions joined in. Like with Sunni Islam, they did the same. They're like, yeah, we like your religion and all that, but we kind of want our own type. So they did it a little bit differently. Maybe today it's different, but back in the day it was like that. So that's mythology, politics, origins, stuff like that. Now I actually want to mention a couple of things about diseases that are the big parts of why things actually happened the way they did. So one of the diseases that gave us vampires the way they sort of are today is called, I guess it's not really what you get from vampires, it's just what sort of led people to believe vampires were a thing. It's called catalepsy, and it puts a person in a catatonic state, which means basically, they seem dead.
Yeah.
So you're so deep in that situation that your pulse is
they think you're dead and they bury you.
they basically bury you. That's why they had at some points,
Bells.
bells on coffins and stuff like that, so you would not end up, being buried alive. If you wake up, you'd just move your finger and the bell would start ringing.
Yeah.
So the point is, I get super hangry, which is angry and hungry, when I don't eat for like one day. Imagine being stuck in like either just being in a catatonic state like that for a few days, or being stuck in a coffin for a few days. Like there were cases,
I
actually
would go
recorded
crazy.
cases, even today, recently, where people would wake up from the state and they would bite themselves because of hunger and fear. So they'd start, they would do it even, I think, they'd wake up and then go back to the same catatonic state, and they basically wake up to bite themselves just so they wouldn't die of
Oh,
starvation, right? To drink
Jesus.
their own blood, and because blood is supposedly has iron and stuff like that. Yeah.
Can you just imagine waking up and just taking a chunk out of yourself?
When you're that hungry, when you've basically been out for like a couple of days, you haven't had water and food. Like one thing is not to have food, another thing is not to actually have water as well. So they need to, I guess, resupply for another couple of days. So this is a very dangerous thing, but it's like not super common and stuff, so you don't really see a lot of that.
Luckily.
Well, so yeah, this was one thing, catalepsy. This is actually responsible for some myths that come
Yes, I
from
have heard of it in the past. I've heard
yeah, for
stories of
sure.
like coffins with like bells on them and shit like that.
Yep. Another thing is there's many types of vampires, right? There's like in modern mythology, modern like science fiction and fiction in general, you have different types that look differently. You have the super sexy, sparkly ones. You have the like more realistic ones. You have, I don't know, the black dude with the lots of guns and stuff that just kills vampires the day, left, right, and center during the day, night, doesn't matter, blade, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Or you have the sexy, I forgot her name, love her though, underworld, that type of stuff. But there's also a vampire called the Nosferatu, which is, I think he's either Bram Stoker's vampire or Bram Stoker's is a different one. But Nosferatu is basically one of the OG vampires. He's the one that looks like a ball sack with ears, like a very skinny ball sack that was just like dried up entirely. There's nothing left in that ball sack. And the thing was, yeah, this is definitely the type of vampire that Bella Swan, or whatever her name is from that one movie, would not fall for, right? He definitely wouldn't be the type to, a ball sack with ears, basically, yeah.
Who would fall for a
Google
ball
it,
sack with
Nosferatu.
ears?
What was that?
Who would fall for a ball sack with ears?
Maybe a vagina with flaps, I don't know. One of those, like maybe female Nosferatus are just like that, similar, I don't know. But yeah, I honestly thought it was an invention of like lazy Hollywood people, Nosferatu, how he looked, right? It's just like literally just a skinny person with like barely any hair, like none at all, I think, and just like slow. And apparently, no, there's a thing, actual disease that is very similar to that. It's called porphyria, which has been discussed about how it's actually the vampire disease, but it's not. It's nothing like it. It just has a few things that
are similar.
Yeah, a little bit similar stuff. So it affects the blood cells, which very important stuff. Blood cells,
yes.
Hemoglobin. And what it does is the skin suffers rashes, blisters, and when it comes into contact with the sun. So there's your legend for
okay, that's where the
that's where the myth of the modern vampire comes, that vampires cannot stay in the sunlight. It's from this specific thing. And then afterwards, in very rare cases, the gums recede, so the teeth look like they're bigger. So you think it's a monster, it's a vampire. Look at those giant ass teeth. They look exposed, they look bigger. Nothing related to albinism, no, I don't think. But maybe that separately is a thing. But this one would basically make you look super, like, you'd probably have bloodied skin because of the rashes if in contact with the sunlight, and you'd have like maybe paler skin. I don't know. I
can't imagine in the past if you had that disease, you were just fucked.
You would probably just be fucked. They'd probably be branded a witch. This is literally why we had vampires and such, because of these diseases.
Yeah.
The body would also have, the poop would be purple. Poop and piss would have purple colors and stuff like that. Anything that came out of your body would basically be purple, blood included.
Oh, that's interesting.
Also, apparently, if you literally stay too much in the sun, like after you were exposed for a little bit too long, you could lose your nose and ears because they're cartilage. They're not really like muscles or anything or bones. It's just cartilage. So this is partially where you get the Nosferatu look. Basically
Poor
a
people.
malformed human being. Katu has it. She's like purple face. No.
That's...
The good thing about it is, sadly, it exists, but the good thing is there's only a few hundred cases recorded globally, and there's never more than that. Like a couple of up to
Luckily,
300.
but even a few hundred, like
Even a
poor
few hundred is
people, if you're
horrible.
born with it,
Yeah,
like you're
you
fucked for the
need
rest of
one
your
of
life.
these to invent the myth of a vampire, and you
Yeah.
have at least 300 at all times, up to 300.
Yeah.
I don't know how they calculate it, but that's what I got. It's like every year there's around like a few new people are born, and a few couple are dying and stuff. So what's this called? This disease, porphyria, I think, or the podcast. I don't know. Podcast's weird. Just accept it.
Podcast has no name yet.
2 more minutes and I'll be done, I think. There's also many cases of diseases from bats and stuff. Ebola, SARS, Corona as well. These are transmitted from bats. Surprisingly, I didn't know the Ebola stuff. SARS I heard about, and Corona, again, that's where it's speculated it came from, bats. Bats tend to eat fruits and insects, so people destroying habitats does not help. They end up in human habitats, and you need, apparently, surprisingly, they don't bite. They just leave a trail of liquids, piss, saliva, poops, and people touching those, you end up just getting the disease. So yeah, that's not a good thing. So basically what this says is have smaller cities and let bats live.
People eating food near where bats are shitting.
Stuff like that, sort of, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if the new corona stuff being related to bats is gonna give new stories of vampires.
That's exactly why I mentioned it, because I am mostly sure that this is gonna birth a new whole generation of vampires in like maybe 10 years from now, 20 years. It's gonna be a different type though. It's gonna be the toilet paper type.
Yeah. Vampires are coming to steal your toilet paper.
Just as a last thing, I guess I'm gonna mention the fact that werewolves were mentioned. So they're sort of responsible in some cultures for the existence of vampires, even though today it's the other way around. It's vampires because they're sexier, right? It's vampires that have the power over werewolves, but that's not the point. Point is, apparently, it's a very simple reason why werewolves were a thing. It was falsely speculated by New York newspapers. I don't know why, of all places. I'm assuming back in the day as well, maybe it just was a myth, but this one gave it its life. The New York people, newspaper people, journalists were basically, rabies gave people the ability to, well, not ability, the unlucky, they put them in this unlucky situation where they would, the foam at the mouth, the going feral type stuff.
Yeah.
There were cases in, let's say, for example, a case in France where people got newlyweds, had to go consummate the wedding and stuff like that, but the guy ended up like biting the woman's head off, like absolutely,
Jesus,
like, opening her chest up and stomach and like basically looking like a monster. Doing so, like he ended up like dying a couple of days after out of rabies. It's not a pleasant thing. Thank God today, if you like get a treatment in the first couple of hours, you're fine.
Luckily.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone biting my tit off.
Hairy ball sacks. Apparently, the rabies stuff like doesn't affect you immediately as well. So, like the specific person in case and discussion was fine for a little bit, but had like weird moments where the parents of the person was like, "Yo, don't marry this dude. He's weird, please." And she was like, "Nah, fuck it, he's fine." And then death.
But Mom, I want to marry him.
He's a werewolf. Look at him. He's so
hairy and hot.
Yeah, he's hairy and hot. Look at him. Look at that beautiful man. So this is it for now. And what do you think of corona vampires and hairy werewolves? And I don't know, basically.
Do you guys know any interesting vampire stories from your country?
There you go.
That we missed.
Tell Kato.
When I was looking for vampire stories, I couldn't find any in particular related to Belgium.
To Belgium? Maybe the Belgians just had different types of monsters. Maybe you guys just had, like, I don't know, the zombies or some shit. Maybe Van Helsing. Wasn't Van Helsing like Dutch or like Belgian or some shit?
Yeah, maybe.
I think it was Dutch.
no idea actually.
I think he was Dutch and he basically probably like killed all the vampires in her country.
Bean's country was just obsessed with witches.
But mine was obsessed with like not dying from the Turks and the Russians and keeping them a little bit like further away from you guys, so you
I'm
guys could
actually
enjoy
not sure
vampire stories.
I'm actually not sure what Belgium was obsessed with. It's something to look into for future podcasts, maybe.
There we go. So future podcast, witches and wait, what did you mention? Which one?
No, I said I don't know what Belgium was obsessed with, so I'll need to Google.
We should do one on Van Helsing.
Yeah, could do. It's like.
But yeah, this is it on Mind. Add more if you want. I think I'm happy you gave me this chance, and I hope you guys learned anything new.
I hope everyone enjoyed this new podcast, and if this is a success, we'll be back with more.
Probably not gonna be, but again, if anyone wants literally anything about anything, just
if you want to hear us talk about anything, hit me up and I'll
if you like
slide
zombies,
into our DMs.
Yeah, slide in her DMs. I'll just be around. Just slide into hers though. Just
our Nix's DMs. That's fine as well.
Grandpa Nixon teaching us near the fireplace. I will let you know, you young whippersnapper, I'm not that old yet. Oh no, my teeth. Oh no.
My back hurts.
Oh, my back.
I know. Yeah, that's it for this podcast today.
Okay, I will yeet.
You got